Team, we've got a fantastic podcast for you today because we've got Anthony Iannarino. And Anthony's got 20 years experience selling and leading sales forces in the staffing industry. You know him because he's the writer and publisher of the salesblog.com, enormously popular sales blog. Anthony's a keynote speaker. He's a sales trainer, author of 4 great books, more coming, by the way. And today we're talking about his latest great book, The Negativity Fast. Talk about an important topic, the negativity fast. Today's conversation, we get into why we as human beings are kind of wired to be negative. It's biological in certain ways. We talk about, how the fact many of us have been through some form of trauma in our life and how we reframe those events so it's not a negative experience, but we can pull some positive things from it. We talk about the awesome power of gratitude. Okay. We talk a little bit about wanting and the perils of social media and, understanding we get somewhere between 17,000 and 50,000 thoughts a day. And, we've got to be mindful about mindfulness to figure out how do we process all of these thoughts and make sure we focus on those things that actually benefit us. We have a great conversation about how important gratitude is to all of us, but the actual physical and mental health benefits of gratitude. Team, we discussed all of this and more in today's podcast with Anthony. He's a super interesting fellow. He is one of the top minds in professional sales today by far. Just a great conversation, which I really enjoyed. I hope you do too. And if you do, please like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast. That really matters to us. And that's how we actually get great guests like Anthony Iannarino. Enjoy the podcast. Anthony, welcome back to the show. It's great to see you again.
You too.
So I shared this offline, Anthony, but I couldn't be more excited to talk to you about your latest book. I know you've got something about AI coming out with Jeb Blunt in the not too distant future, but I was so excited to talk to you about the negativity fast. Proven techniques to increase positivity, reduce fear, and boost success. Such a need for this in professional sales, but what an incredible need for this in society in general. So in the book, you talk a little bit about, your background. And one of the things I was just amazed to pick up was that you were negative. Given the sales career that you had, or you saw yourself as that way, this amazing career that you've had, everything you've done. So first of all, welcome to the show. But tell me a little bit about that journey for you, and that with the amazing success you've had, you may have been a little bit negative along that journey as well.
I was world class.
Okay.
I had 2 brain surgeries, one on Friday, one on Saturday. They took a piece of my skull out, and then they removed something called an arterial venous malformation. And after that, they gave me a number of drugs to take so I wouldn't have seizures. I only ever had 1 seizure. And it was a surprise to find out that they cut a piece of my brain off only after they recovered me after the second surgery. So I didn't know that there was any possibility of losing part of my brain. So I didn't know that at the beginning, and they didn't either. They just had to open up and see what was in there. So,
oh, wow.
After I woke up, they said we had to remove part of your brain because it was bruised, and it would mean you would have seizures for the rest of your life. So we got rid of it. And I wasn't prepared for that. And then phenobarbital, that's a drug that will prevent you from having seizures, but it's also used to tranquilize elephants. That's what they use to do that because it's so strong. And
wow.
Between the drugs, between having my head cut open, I started to become angry. Angry enough that I was trying to pull into an apartment complex, and a guy was coming towards me, and was being a little aggressive, and I got out of the car and I started
Oh,
walking towards him, and he got back in his car. I'm not a great fighter. I was involved with those, but I'm not a good fighter. But I was just angry. And
mhm.
over time, in your 20s, you want the world to look like what you think it should look like.
You do. Yeah.
And it takes a little while for you to get past that and understand the world's been here for about 4.8 billion years, and it's a lot older than you, and it's been burning and churning for a long time, and it's not going to change because you want it to change. That's a very hard thing to do, is to change the whole world, but few people have been able to do that. I got angrier and angrier and angrier. I was in law school, very political. I was political, and I had a great mentor. His name was Mike Distelhorst. And Mike and I went and got coffee every time we had class. He taught contracts. So we would go get coffee, and one day he said, you just have to, you're angry, and you need to stop being angry. And he said, you're so wrapped up in politics and global politics and all these things. And at that time, you're in Toronto, so this won't make any sense to you. We had Bill Clinton passed a law that said you guys didn't pay enough taxes in the past, so we're going to retroactively give you a bill of what you still owe, even though we
Wow.
paid. Yeah. So, and then I was really mad about that. And he's like, look, you can't do anything about those things. You have no power to do that. And you worry about the government and politics and all that stuff. No one is going to have a better impact on your children than you. So it has nothing to do with that. Go and outrun the bastards, get the money that you want so that you can take care of your family, and don't worry about anything else. Now, I wish I would have taken his advice immediately.
Hmm.
I did not. It took me about 6 months. And then I remembered that conversation one day, and I thought, could I get rid of all of politics? And I thought, I can get rid of everything. So I got rid of all the political magazines, newspapers. I got rid of all my political books. I got rid of everything. And I thought, I'm going
All
to start.
all back in your 20s. Sorry, Anthony. Is
Yeah,
this when
yeah,
you were in 20,
yeah,
you did all of this because you went back to university as a more mature student, but so you were 26 or 28 where everybody else was younger, but you did this back in those days.
yeah.
Wow.
And then I decided I'm going to get rid of every negative uh, thing or person in my life, and I'm going to clean up what's going on up here. So I decided to do that, and I decided to call it, I was going on a negativity fast. So what I did is I got rid of all of the sources, including television. Like television,
Yes.
I've not watched any kind of political news show since, I don't know, the early 90s.
Yeah.
I mean,
Wow.
I don't watch anything. I know now that Fox is for conservatives, and MSNBC is for liberals, and I know that they're like warring tribes now, and I think that's totally horrible for a society like ours. And I don't think that it should be that way. So I just ignore it. And I describe myself as post-political. I can't
Hmm.
do anything about it. And look, if you read the Stoics, you'll find out, like, if anything is out of your ability to do something about it, you just leave it alone. Just leave it alone. Don't worry about any of that. You can't do anything about it. Nobody can probably do it, but so you just let it go. And I did this for 30 days. And at the end of 30 days, I felt better, so
Hmm.
much better that I did it again. And I did it the second time, and I felt even better because I was just only um, paying attention things that were something I could do something about. And then after the second time I did that, I realized you've still got all that stuff in there. You got to like blast it out. Like I was imagining like a fire hose and trying to just like get it to blow out, like get all of
Yeah.
that out. And I just listened to Tony Robbins, Stephen Covey, Brian Tracy, all the people who are positive people. And I
Yes.
just only took in positivity. And I realized I should have done that the first time. I should have just started taking in all the positivity. But I figured it out on the third try. And then from that point forward, every day driving to work, driving to college, driving to law school, I was listening to something that was positive and future oriented, and I felt a lot better. And then I decided, why would you stop this? What would be
Right.
a reason? What would you decide that would say like I need to go back and try to be angry again? And
Yeah.
it doesn't work. So you just stay and you feel better.
Well, you know what? Of course you do if you go through it. And we've had a couple of guests on the show, Anthony, talk about things. We're going to get into everything in the negativity fast, but they've talked about things like, why don't you assess how you feel after you just spent 45 minutes looking at your phone or Twitter or Instagram or TikTok? Assess how you feel before you started, and then assess how you feel afterwards. You always feel worse. And I'm sorry, maybe I didn't pick this up in my research today, but what I didn't grasp so much was that you were doing this back in the early 90s. So that's the amazing thing to me, because I absolutely, everything we're talking about seems so hyper relevant in today's world, but the fact you got such an early jump on it and just cut it all out, like cutting out the news, and nobody was doing that back in the mid 90s. It's interesting that you got such an early jump. So I like to help the team. As the people who listen to the podcast run businesses. They run large sales teams, primarily sales focused, but business focused, lots of entrepreneurs. You've broken the negativity fast into, 12 chapters, why we're negative, talking yourself into a negative state, relative to me, very relevant for me. Empathy and how to lie to yourself, how to stop complaining. It's a chapter I loved, but not as much as this one. The awesome power of gratitude. I'd
Mhm.
love to do a deep dive there. The awesome power of gratitude, reframing negative events. And certainly you just shared a very negative event with your surgeries, your two surgeries. How to live happily with political divisiveness, wanting, and the perils of social media. I like the hedonic adaptation point. That one really resonated with me. How to change your state, mindfulness, how to forget your problems and concerns, and the negativity fast itself. So there's, by the way, team, this is absolutely a must read, not for everybody in professional sales, but just everybody. There's, I also like the scientific research and kind of how we got there, but the amazing, I wonder if we could jump in a little bit and skip. The power of gratitude is just shocking.
I
And
I'm a wide reader, so I read a lot of things. I'm always listening to an audible book at the same time, like in the shower. My wife put a
oh,
little
wow.
soap thing up so I can put my phone there so I can listen. And then I
Wow.
do this. So I'm always taking in content and trying to find good strategies, things that I think are helpful. And when I started when I started looking at gratitude, like I know some things about gratitude, but what happened is I'm writing this book and I'm finishing chapters and I'm sending the chapter to the editor. And I said, it's like gratitude is just it's just overblown. I mean, you can't understand how much gratitude does. Like you can't imagine. Uh, it will give you better cognitive function. It will reduce your chances of having a heart attack. It will increase your immunity system. It will, I mean, and the list just keeps going on and going on and going on and going
Sleep
on.
better,
Sleep,
increases
yeah,
your
lower,
generosity.
lower blood pressure, like all of these things, less inflammation in your body. I mean, and you see this and you're like, nobody's going to believe this. No, nobody's going to believe that gratitude does all these things. And so I decided, well, actually, I didn't decide. My editor said, you should cite that. And then I said, I can cite that. You know, I've read a bunch of things as I was doing this, and I have the citations. So I started putting citations in. And then as I started going through the rest of it, she's like, why don't you just cite as everything? And I
Yeah.
said, okay, I'll cite everything. And I went and cited every single thing that I said in here because I don't want people to think like this is my opinion or my perspective about any of these things. This is all from science, and it's all of these things have been looked at for a very long time, with the exception of post-traumatic growth syndrome, which
Mm.
there's only maybe two big papers on that. There's not very much yet, but it is starting to have people paying attention to it.
So that one also amazingly interesting, where something terrible happens or something challenging happens, can have a negative effect, actually can have a positive effect. And we'll talk about the definition of that term. I learned so many terms speaking about this, but I'll just circle back on, this science around gratitude. And team, this is chapter 5, around page 94, 95. But you talk about theories from Zixi Zen, Emmons and McCulloch, um, Fra and Bono. I apologize if I'm catching any of those names wrong. And then the positive outcomes from gratitude, just absolutely shocking. You touched on all of them. Maybe the other one, just frankly, increased self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought something, just an artifact here today again, because this book resonated so much with me. I've got a little gratitude journal.
Mm-hmm.
And for the folks out there, and what happened, I think humans have this amazing way of trying to survive. But for me, after being in the corporate world, running large sales organizations for kind of 15 years, when I started as an entrepreneur, really from zero, it was really important to start every day and just think about some great things that had happened.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost the three blessings,
Yeah.
that you bring up in the three blessings we bring up in the book, where just writing them down. And then I got into this habit on a weekly basis of loving a coffee on a Sunday morning, taking a pause and just pulling out my gratitude journal and go, what about all the great things that have happened this week? And it was so surprising to me how long the list was.
Right.
When you take a little bit of that time and actually just go through writing things down, and there's something that happens when you write something down versus typing versus dictating. At least for me, I'm looking at it. It just gives you such a platform to build on, and it's just amazing. And then suddenly you've got a book. 3 or 4 years later, I had this book, that's 80 pages long of all great things that have happened. So the odd time there's going to be a little bit of a dip, it's nice to go back to this and just think of all the blessings and all the great things that one has in somebody's life. It's amazing the difference it makes on your future.
Yeah,
You
there's a
know,
book called Hope Circuit by Marty Seligman, and the three blessings was in that book. And I liked to do the gratitude journal in the morning. Uh, and then after I started practicing it the other way, like when you write three things that were good throughout the day and why,
yes,
if you, at 30 days, go look at this and you're going to go like, my life's really good. It's really good. I
yes,
should be grateful for this. And if you do it in the morning, like you didn't have any experiences yet, so you're going to go to, I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my business. I'm grateful. And you'll just be repeating over and over again. But when it's something that happens each day and you have to find three things that were good and why, it changes this. So now you have to do it at night before you go to bed because you need that time to figure out what those three things were. But I think if people would do this and put it in a journal like yours, and then go back after a month and go back and look at each day and say, it's really good here.
And boy, it is really good here.
Yeah.
I love the reference in the book to the, keeping up with the Joneses and hedonic adaptation. And, I've noticed hedonic adaptation from the time I was 25 onward. You're buying suits, you like going to the store, you get a nice new suit. Suddenly some good things happen to you. So you start buying suits that are 3 times the cost. And then you're coming home going, I don't feel any different.
Right.
And it's hedonic adaptation is this, you buy things. I think I'm going to get a new car. It's going to change my life. It doesn't. You revert back to the same baseline level of happiness.
I'm doing this right now, Mark. I had when I needed to buy a new car, it was in COVID. There was one car available to me at the Mercedes dealer, and it's
Okay.
an S580, like the
Okay.
most expensive car, but the only car. That was the only car. So I didn't buy it. I said I'm going to lease it. And right now I'm like, this car is like it's amazing car, but I don't want to keep it. I don't want to keep this
Mm.
car. I don't want this kind of car. It was just the only car I had available to me, and I'd leased it. But I also gave back the car that I had before that, and I said, this car's a problem. And I live in Ohio, so it's like
Mm.
Toronto. There's snow,
Yeah.
there's potholes, and every time I hit a pothole, I would lose not only the tire, I would have to get another wheel because it would break the wheels. And I took it
Jeez.
in, and I walked into my sales manager there, and I said, "What are we going to do about this car?" Well, first I said, do you think I'm a good client?" And he said, "You're a great client." I said, "Do you know how many cars I bought from you?" And he goes, "I know exactly how many." I said, "Good. Okay." I said, "What are we going to do about this?" He said, "I'm going to buy it back from you." And
Wow.
I said, "For how much?" And he said, "For what you paid." And I said,
Wow.
and I said, How are you going to do that?" And he said, "I'm going to sell that car for more than you paid for it. There's no cars here. I'm going to sell it for more money than I'm doing this."
Oh,
So then I was able to put a lot of money down on this very expensive car that I mean, I love the car, but I don't need that car. Uh, it was just the only thing that I could have. I,
you got into all, I mean, this is the beauty of the book. You get into science, you have a beautiful way of writing, Anthony, so that complex ideas become very, very simple. Martin Seligman, this leader in psychology, and one of the first people to say, hey, psychology is a little less about, eliminating misery and a little more on focusing what's good in life.
yeah,
So
right.
focusing on the
Flourishing is what
positive.
he calls it. Yeah.
Right. And you reference a couple of great things throughout the book, and maybe I skipped this at the beginning, but I do think it's an interesting to think about for everybody listening. Why is the default mechanism for so many people negativity? Why are we negative, or why
Yeah.
do we be negative by nature?
It is nature. It is our nature, and it is because we have something called the negativity bias. And most of the time, while you have all these thoughts over and over and over again, and they're mostly all negative, like 80% of them tend to be negative, and you keep repeating them. And so you just keep burning in the negativity bias. And it's just because of how humans evolved on this planet. I mean, that's how it went. If you were optimistic, it's probably a dangerous world. It's still a dangerous world, really, but you have to do something to beat that back. And for me, it was getting rid of the negativity. Not that I don't have a bad day occasionally. I mean, of course you do. Some of it, I think, is also just because your chemicals and you have all this stuff going on in the human body, and sometimes it's just out of whack. I mean, you could probably get yourself into a bad, uh, let's just say, in a bad attitude, just by eating wrong. I mean,
Well,
Yeah, or drinking or whatever you do. I mean, it can turn that for you.
Well, by the way, those who do enjoy a little bit of TV, they'll remember those Snickers commercials. I'm not sure sugar is the best cure for this, but there were Snickers commercials about somebody being in a bad state, and they would actually be some other person, some other actor, and being very chippy. And it was very, very funny. And say, hey, this Snickers will fix that. I'm not sure sugar is always the answer, of course.
It does. It works perfectly at the beginning, but then in an hour, then it's not the same.
Right. So I can't remember where I picked this up, but um, uh, in the amygdala,
Hmm.
you know, the fact that through evolution we were always, as you say, being a little scared and worried and careful. 5 times a second, even today, our biology is set up so that we're scanning the universe for things that could be harmful to us. 5 times a second. And that comes into play a lot in our sales training. I know you're, one of the world's top sales trainers. When we're in a room for the first time training some sales leaders or salespeople, they're actually worried. And they walk into an event going, I wonder if this is kind of sales training event where they're going to pull me up at the front and make me do a role play and make me feel uncomfortable. And we go through very intentional processes to talk about how this is a safe space and nobody ever looks silly in a workshop except us. And I can physically see the change on people when we say that. There's sort of this wall. And then as soon as we say, don't worry, we're not going to do that. You're not going to feel silly. We're going to look silly. It changes everything. So everybody's worried that this, negativity bias. It's also the same reason none of us or few of us are very good investors, because the concept of losing $10 is so much more painful than the concept of making $10. So maybe from an investment perspective, we take it a little bit safe. And that's certainly a wealth management issue for all those financial planners out there, trying to help people break through that bias to be negative. So I think there's lots of things. There's biology that
Hmm.
causes us to feel negative. There's events. You and I are the same age. People live through things. You had a traumatic event in your life, with double brain surgeries, and the story of waking up, being abducted, and trying to break out of being abducted until you realize you're actually in an ambulance. So impactful when you read that. And then you were negative after the surgeries where they removed part of your brain. You didn't know that was going to be part of the AVM treatment. But I think, Anthony, everybody's got events they could view as negative in their life. I'm
You're,
sure
uh,
anybody would view them as negative.
I think
How do
that the
we?
data on that is it's about 98% of people. Yeah,
Right.
that's a very high number.
And so in chapter 6, we start to think about, and you share about research. How do we reframe those negative events in our life? How do we reframe those negative events in your life? We talked a little bit about Freud. We talked a little bit about Adler, but one of the most interesting points that came out of that reading that was post-traumatic growth concept.
Yeah.
So the idea that these terrible things that might happen to us are challenging things that can actually have a positive outcome. Let's talk about a little bit about that.
Yeah, Adler's really interesting because what uh, he was on the opposite side of Freud, and Freud thought like if you have some traumatic event that happens to you, that will go with you for the rest of your life. And Adler's like, that's the past. That past can't come and get you now because you're already out of this. Like, so that's it. And that was what he contributed to this. But what we know, because there's not very much science yet on post-traumatic growth syndrome, but what it does say, if you can find meaning in that suffering that you had, because when you have trauma, I'm reading a guy from Toronto, what's his name? Uh, Gabriel Mate. Yeah. So he's got a
I
book
don't
on,
know.
it's called The Myth of Normal. And the book is all about trauma. It's a very, very good book. It's a helpful book if you've had those sort of traumas. But if you can find meaning in it,
Yeah.
you can move forward with post-traumatic growth syndrome because you gained something from this terrible trauma that you've had. That is, and I'm reading that book right now. It's a giant book, maybe
Is
600
it?
pages. Yeah. Very good book, very good writing, very all science again. But if you can find the meaning in it and turn it into something that my favorite philosopher is Nicholas Taleb. So he wrote Anti-Fragile, uh, The Black Swan, Fooled by Randomness. Those are his main books, and that his thinking about fragility, robustness, and anti-fragile is if you are fragile, if something happens to you, you break. If
Hmm.
you're robust, you're the phoenix. So you burn down, but then you just come right back the same way you were before. But
Hmm.
his Greek reading, uh, you want to be a hydra. You cut off a hydra's head, it grows two more. So like
Right.
go ahead, keep cutting my head off because all you're doing is making me stronger and stronger and stronger. And I think that that's true for some of us if you can get through the trauma. I want to say something about trauma. If you've had trauma, I'm not downplaying that. Like if you had that, you had that, and you were absolutely right to feel how you felt when you had that. I've had probably more trauma than a lot of people just because of the life that I've had early. But I think that you have to pay attention to trauma. In this book, The Myth of Normal, if you've had a lot, it'd be a good book for you to read and try to get some perspective on that and see if you can change that from something that's what Freud would say would hold you back and move to try to get the growth part of this because it is part of growth.
Well, first of all, great reference to a book. So we'll put that in the show notes, folks, and thank you for that. And then, you talked about some of the philosophers. You referenced Nietzsche's "That which doesn't kill you makes you stronger." And I would absolutely say, as I was reading it, when I read your books, Anthony, I like physical books, so I always buy books and physical books. But they're dog-eared. There's notes all over them. We've all had trauma, and I won't share the details of mine given our time here. But I thought about some of those things, and then it was helpful to write down and go, "What did that do? How did that, help me?"
Mm-hmm.
And there were very good things that came from it that sort of changed the rest of my life and put it in a different place. One of the reasons, the other thing this book caused me to do was to go back into some assessments. I was wondering why this resonated so much with me. We read literally hundreds of books a year because of the podcast. And I went back, teamed into something called a Clifton Strength Assessment. There's different
Mm-hmm.
assessments you can do, but I like that our team has to go through the Clifton Strengths if you work through in the funnel. And it comes up with these top 5 things about you. And my top 5 are learner, input, achiever, intellection, and number 5 is positivity. And for most of
If, but just by having this conversation that we've had a number of times, I would have said number one was sexual charisma for you at the
Thank
beginning.
you for that.
That's what I thought would be number one.
I get
And
that a
then I
lot.
would say uh, a stunning personality. Uh, is that fair?
You know what? I think it's fair if the only person rating is my wife, Donna. I think and on a good day, if I've been good, but it's one of those things in my life. I've always had almost a bit of an allergic reaction to negativity, and so I'm an entrepreneur, like you're an entrepreneur, and we have these visions and ideas and growth. And frankly, a lot of times somebody has to sort of pull us back a little bit, to reality. But I have difficulty with that. This idea of no, 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 no. I can't have that be the first reaction to everything.
Right.
And so the other thing was, surrounding yourself with positive people. That's almost been a bit of a survival mechanism for me my whole life. It's just ended up working. Great people. You might come across somebody who's super funny in short bursts. They have value to contribute to the world, but if they're organically negative, I can't. Suddenly they don't come into the close five or six people in the group.
Have
But
you ever done an Enneagram?
I no, and I don't know what it is.
It's a very old structure that puts people into 9 different categories. I happen to be what's called an 8, which is a challenger or a protector. So I was everything from my childhood made me negative. Everything did. Like my dad leaving, like all these things that happened to me through my childhood, a lot of violence, all kinds of bad things. But uh, I think if you would do an Enneagram, you probably would be a 3, which is
Hmm.
somebody who's chasing success. And they tend to be more positive about all those things. So I have an adaptation because I'm an 8. So I'm a protector, so it's very hard to take advantage of me, and just from my childhood. So I have to do a lot of work to be positive. You are probably just naturally positive. I'm naturally negative, so I have to do a lot of work to not be negative. And if you haven't done there's only 3 real angers in Enneagram. If you are a perfectionist, you're the most angry. Uh,
Hmm.
if you are the second, you would be my wife. My wife is
Share.
yeah, Cher is a 9, which is a peacemaker. But
Hmm.
that's another anger, and I'm an 8 anger. So I know those, and I can almost tell people what they are just by looking at them and having a short conversation. I can pick it up very quickly.
Oh, interesting. So the team will put a link to that in the show notes as well. And to those editing this podcast, when Anthony mentioned that I'm a sexual dynamo, that's going to be the intro phrase for this podcast, obviously. And please promote that on social media. So uh, chapter 8, it's so obvious, but still such an issue. Wanting and the perils of social media. Wanting and the perils of social media. Team, this is just shocking. So Anthony earlier talked about the number of thoughts and ideas we have. And in the book, he references in a given day, between 17,000 and 50,000 thoughts go through our mind. Many of them get repeated.
Mhm.
The other stat that just floored me was the fact that many of us on average, pick up our phone 52 times. Let me check the note on this, but 52 times a day. And it goes up to 132 times. High users pick up their phone 132 times a day. And then we're jumping into social media.
There's an author named Morgan Housel, and he wrote a book called Psychology of Money. You know that one?
I don't. Another
Oh, it
great
does.
one.
It's all about your emotions about money. Okay, so that if you're an investor, his second book is called Same as Ever, and in that book, if you were to ask my dad, probably my mom, they would say the 50s was the best time in America. They will
Okay.
say that was the best time. And then he explains why that was true. Everybody was just about in the same place. Like there was not this disparity of a 1% that owns like
Oh,
50%
right.
of this. And so you have a house and you have one parent that stays home and one is working. Everybody's got a car. Everybody has it's just parity. Everything's parity. And
Everybody's got a job. The world economies were exploding. The baby boomers needed everything. So,
yeah,
wasn't too crowded. You could progress if you did the right things. If it was
The
kind of the American
disparity
dream.
now is so there's so much disparity. It's causing us to have more problems than we probably should.
Well, but yet in the book you bring up the fact that 99% of the world makes less than 33K US a year.
Right.
So
If you're in that range, you're in the top 1% of the world.
right. That's not something that most of us would ever think about or put front of mind when our neighbor just bought the same Mercedes you bought, during COVID. So that comes in and you kind of go, boy, suddenly I've got a little bit of a desire for this and a little bit of a desire for that. I've got um, maybe a little bit of a pet peeve on this one, but I do try with social media, just a trick for us. Being an entrepreneur again, I kind of come up with these tricks where I get to recharge. I'm an extrovert, but I absolutely have to recharge. And so I can be the life of the party, but I can't be the life of the party 7 days of the week. I need to recharge. On Saturdays, what I typically do is I go device free. So I'll have it in my car turned off in the event there's an emergency or I'm by the side of the road and I get a flat. I'm driving in Ohio and I hit a pothole, but I just feel everything seems a little simpler when I'm not trying to stay up with anything else except enjoying that particular day and doing the 3 or 4 things I want to do in that day and making sure I show love to the people I care about. And by the way, great tip in the book, gang. I mean, at the end of each chapter, this book is so beautifully laid out. It gives you easy exercises to start moving in the right direction or continue the positive momentum. One is just tell the people you love them.
That's one of the things that people always comment about my family. So we never say goodbye without saying I love you to like everybody, like every single
Nice.
time, every single day. Every time I call my mom, every time I call my dad, every time I talk to any of my children, any of my family members, and should anything happen, that would be the last thing they heard from me. And
Yeah,
so
fantastic.
yeah, so we do that, and people always comment on that when they see us. Even like my son and my two daughters, they do it all the time with all their friends around. That's just how they grew up, and people comment and they think it's novel, but I think you should just do that anyway, right? Make sure that they hear it.
Course. And I think the other thing is maybe they think it's novel. I bet it's also contagious.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about, kind of a positive dynamic. It can be contagious. And for those folks listening today, Anthony, let's get into some tactics. There were so many great tactics. I mean, there's strategies here, but then we get into some tactics of how do we get rid of that negativity? How do we continue to do this? So many good ideas. We
It,
talk about exercise, we talk about food, we talk about empathy,
mhm.
we talk about helping others. If you're in a negative state, helping others. But you've pulled something there. What have you pulled up?
I just picked this book up. I want to say something about this because I don't often say this, but what I can tell you, what I was doing here is I did so much reading that I realized that all of these first 11 chapters is the fact that you are making yourself negative. So, and you are making yourself negative,
Hmm.
and you can stop it. And I thought if I didn't provide all of this proof that you are making yourself negative, I don't know that the negativity fast would work as well as it does. I get all kinds of notes from people who just tell me like I feel a lot better, and mostly it starts with the political thing. It's like I gave up politics. I'm not watching TV. I feel way better. Yeah, that's because you're not eating poison every day. They're
Right.
poisoning you with poisoning you against your neighbors and your family. And it doesn't make any sense to do that. You're here for 4,000 weeks. Don't spend it like that. Don't eat poison every day. Don't ingest that. It will harm you. It does harm you.
Well, you know what? It's so interesting. What it was, which chapter? It's I'm sorry, we're gonna skip, guys, cut this little pause out. Chapter 7, how to live happily with political divisiveness. There
Yeah.
was a time, you pointed out, we're Canadian. I live in Toronto. We're Canadians up here. In our formative years, our politics was shockingly boring. So it's just so boring. And so everybody's the same, everybody's kind of nice, all these kind of things. I used to love watching Meet the Press on a Sunday morning because I've always been such a fan of the US and spent lots of time there, but it was actually really entertaining at one point in time. So I'd enjoy it on a Sunday morning, watching Meet the Press over, coffee and bagel with Donna. And then over the last, again, I didn't get a jump like you did, but I'd say over the last 10 years, I used to pop in at night coming home from work and, off our living room, there'd be a TV with CNN sort of on. And eventually, we decided we got to turn it off. It cannot be on because it seemed to go in a different direction for us where I said, it's just negative. I can't have this. I can't get pummeled by this negativity. As soon as I come into the place I'm happiest to be in the world, there's no place for that anymore. So again, controlling these 17 to 50,000 thoughts that go through our head and all these images, somehow we've got to control what's going on in there. And you talked about the first chapter, the 11 chapters saying this is about us making ourselves negative. I could have this wrong. It's been a long time, but I believe the early books of Tony Robbins talked about your state.
Yeah,
And
right.
whether you're feeling great or whether you're feeling terrible, it's the same effort to put yourself in that state. It's actually hard to stay negative and to be in a miserable mood and all those kinds of things. It takes effort, to do that. So if you're mindful about it, you can just take the effort to be in a positive state, which
I defy you to stay in a negative state while you're running.
fantastic
I,
exercise.
you can't stay negative. Like your body is getting too much air in it, and now you're breathing. And once you start breathing, the negativity starts to wane. And all you have to do is or lift heavy weights if you're allowed to lift heavy weights. I'm not allowed to do that, but if you can, that'll change your physiology, your
It absolutely
biology.
does.
It will change everything for you. All you have to do is run or work out. That'll do it.
I've never I share, again, I'm no perfect example of anything, but I absolutely share. I am a junkie for working out. And so I've always been an athlete. I've always continued that on. You have periods of up and down. I tell people I've never left a gym feeling worse than when I came in.
Right.
So as long as I can
Except
get
for
myself,
leg day.
I, yeah, actually, it's the sprint training. For me, it's the sprint training where I go, okay, you've got to gun it as fast as you can, and your brain's saying, I'm not getting enough oxygen. It's telling you that while you're doing it, but you're looking at this clock. But if you can get yourself there, you just feel so much better, and you're being in a room with other people who are doing it. Everybody feels better. But let's touch on before we get to the negativity fast itself. Let's touch a little bit on minding mindfulness.
Yeah,
And
I meditated for a very long time. No, let me rephrase that. I thought I was meditating for a very long time.
okay,
I was not actually meditating. What I was doing is something called samadhi, which is the preparation for meditation and mindfulness. And I have studied with two Zen masters, Goshen Roshi and Genpo Roshi. Two very different guys. One of them has this thing that he can get you into a state like very, very fast. He did it to me and it lasted for maybe 24 hours where I was just like, it was amazing. Uh,
Wow.
but when I started talking to them about what I was doing, they were explaining to me that that's samadhi. What you're doing is getting ready to do meditation and mindfulness. And I figured out how to do that because I was working with these two uh, Zen masters. Uh,
Hmm.
Genpo said, "Don't ever sit on a mat for 40 years. You don't have to do that. All you need to do is sit down." And he said, "Do you wake up in the middle of the night?" Yep. He said, "Sit in a chair, put a blanket on, just meditate, and then you'll feel like you slept 8 hours anyway."
Wow.
And that was very helpful for me. But what I learned to do is to just be aware of what's going on. That's it. Just like there's a bird chirping out my window right there, and you don't focus on it. You just go, "Oh, there's a bird. Oh,
Hmm.
I got some sort of a crick in my back," and you just notice, you just notice, you just notice, and you keep doing it over and over and over again, and just breathe, and that's it. And then everything starts to settle. Now, if you're not a Zen Buddhist, uh, and maybe you're not even religious, but if you could do any kind of like contemplative prayer, same thing, same exact thing. It works exactly the same way. It lets everything fall to the bottom, and
Yeah.
it's absolutely worth learning how to do that and to practice it.
I have not done transcendental meditation. That takes training. I've done sort of, I'm not sure what it is, but cheap and cheerful meditation. Frankly, it's the Peloton meditation I do every day, and listening and going through it. And it even that completely changes my outlook on a day, where some days I'll wake up, team, and I'll sort of feel like, um, boy, I got a lot of work to do today. I've got all these things and all of these meetings, and there's a certain perspective on that. And I'll find if I meditate even for 10 or 15 minutes, let's take a little bit of calm. I come out of that thinking, it's not work. I actually get to do this.
Mhm.
I get to have this amazing conversation with somebody I really respect, Anthony Iannarino. I get to work with clients and to help them achieve some meaningful business outcomes or train amazing people. That actually that's what I want to do. I get, to hug and kiss my wife before I go out, who I love very much. I get to text my family members who I love. So the intention, just understanding what we have again, it's just turning everything off and then realizing it, being intentional, and then it leads to everything else in the book, feeling the gratitude. I want to say one quick thank you that really touched me when you want to feel better, be generous or help others in need. I've absolutely felt that, team. So if you're ever feeling a little down, help somebody else out. And I just like to spread this idea. Um, my wife, whenever we're out or we travel to different countries, but even in downtown Toronto, there are a lot of homeless people in downtown Toronto. There's a lot of homeless people in every US city we go to. Her whole life, she's been that person who will go up to the homeless person, have a quick chat, maybe give them some money, maybe go get them a meal or a coffee. And admittedly, in my heart, I was always sort of thinking, hey, don't do that, or let's just move on, or it doesn't have to be every time. I was almost, put off a little bit because I had to reframe the way we look at this type of thing. And now that I understand most of those folks are going through a mental health issue,
Mhm.
I've taken Anthony's tip as a great one. This day and age, nobody carries money. You don't need to. I carry money now because Anthony's tip was, see how you feel if you actually just give them 20 bucks or 50 bucks or give some and see the impact, help somebody else. That's a great one. I'd love to spread the word on that through this podcast. So everybody just help some of those people most in need. but I think everybody in their sphere of influence has someone in need. And boy, do you feel good if you can help somebody else. It gets you out of your own head into helping them.
It's a just a shift, just like that. I was in Austin doing a keynote, and I was walking down the street, and I sort of overtook a guy who was in a bad situation, and I could just see I was looking at it, and I only had a 50, but I chased him down and I gave him the 50. I've done this a whole bunch of times. I had a guy with me when I was in San Francisco, and there's a very old lady. I mean, looking like maybe 100, like, and she's got this cart, and we were on our way to an event, and I said, listen, you can either run with me because I'm going to run and chase her down and I'm going to give her some money, or you can just go and I'll meet you there. And he's like, nope, I'll run with you. And
Hmm.
I said, well, I'm not going to let her keep going. Like, she was sort of stuck over like a hose. She couldn't get her thing up. And I was like, no, I just have to go do something. Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? And it helps you also, right before that event. Anthony, I know how busy you are. We've got to wrap things up here a little bit. I've got to ask the questions or ask you to share with us. What are you recommending with the negativity fast to the people listening here today? What are you suggesting they do for the next 30, 60, 90 days?
The next 30, 60, 90 days, and maybe if you really do this, maybe forever, maybe you leave a whole bunch of these things behind. I do want to tell you one thing that I found only after I wrote the book. If you are a chronic complainer, like I was for a long period of time in my 20s, you are shrinking your uh, hippocampus. Like, you're
Hmm.
shrinking it. It literally starts shrinking. So I always want to tell people that because I want to scare them into stop complaining. It's horrible for you. It also has uh, impact on your mental health and your physical health. So you just have to let things go. The Stoics are worth paying attention to. They're Just let everything go. If you can't do anything about it, move on with your life. Don't even worry about it. And that will make you a lot less susceptible to negativity.
So you list out the things that people complain about most, and the vast majority of them are things we have absolutely no control over. The weather, traffic, politics, noise, public transportation. Here's a great one. I do this all the time. Internet connectivity. I can't, internet because it could impact this. We have a regulated telco industry in Canada, so I'm always complaining we pay too much for too little. Inflation, waiting in line. So there's other things we do control, our relationships, lack of time, lack of money, but like all of these things, if you can't control it, why waste any space on it? Just improve your life, improve the life of those around you. Focus on the things we can do. The amazing power of positivity is,
Mhm.
in my view, it's just contagious and it's exponential. And everybody, of course, Anthony, they're going to enjoy today's conversation. First of all, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for joining us again. It's great to have you back on the Selling Well podcast. I can't wait to have you back again after your next book coming out with Jeb Blunt on AI. Everybody get
Right.
on the pre-order for that one, please, and thank you. But how do people learn more about you, or where should we point them today? Outside of the link to buy the book on Amazon, team, please do that. But outside of that, how do they find out more about you?
Two places. One great place to connect is LinkedIn. I do a small post on LinkedIn every day. I write 1,000 words at 4 o'clock in the morning, but then I take Gemini now and I have it break it down into something that's easier for people to read in a short post. So that's one place. The second place is thesalesblog.com. And if you go there, you should sign up for the VIP newsletter. And
Fantastic.
those are two places.
Fantastic. Thank you. All those links, team, are in the podcast notes. A special thank you to Anthony Iannarino today. Fantastic book, The Negativity Fast. Highly, highly recommend it. And a thank you to all of you. Team, we run this podcast because we want to help improve the lives of salespeople. And so we hope today's podcast was helpful and you enjoyed it as much as I did. And we're growth oriented and we love constructive criticism. So if there's other ways that we can keep improving this podcast so it's of more value to you, please email me directly, markcox@inthefunnel.com, markcox@inthefunnel.com. I respond to that email and I respond to everybody who gives us an idea. And thank you for doing that. If you like today's podcast, please like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast. That's really helpful to us. And actually, it helps us get amazing guests like Anthony. Thank you again, Anthony. We'll look forward to seeing you soon. Good selling to everybody.